So this is a very special hotspot because we have Braid, the Witness creator, Jonathan Blow.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how
Plenty
it
of
goes.
time for things to go downhill.
Right. This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where it typically gets easier. I'm probably going to cut this because this is awful. But anyway, so yeah, we're really excited to have you in the studio. So your first game, Braid, came out in. Wait, is that your first game?
Well, no, technically.
Okay, let's quantify this.
But it sort of is.
Okay.
Like since Braid is a game that I made when I decided to go again and make a game that I was designing 100% myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of making it, I sort of learned a lot about game design that I didn't expect to and became a different designer.
Mm-hmm.
So I would sort of say that I do consider that my first game now, even though I did stuff before that. It's really not that important.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just realized that I had this hardcore joke that I was going to start off with. It was going to be like, all right, so now let's start off what everybody wants to know about. How awesome is Modern Warfare 3 going to be? But I blew that joke. And it's no good coming back to it.
That's fine.
So let's just start off with the other jokes. No good?
No good.
No good. All right. How fundamentally offensive would it be if I asked you what Braid was about?
It's not offensive, but it's the kind of thing that I don't really answer.
No, yeah.
I mean, I don't like talking about it because I feel, if there's a point behind games in general as things that could, I'm going to use the A word, artistic, things that could be artistic. It's part of that point is that it's different from writing or movies or talking about something. And if I could tell you what Braid was about, then I didn't need to spend years of my life making the game. I could have just written an essay saying,
right.
Here's what I think. So it's important to me that the game just kind of live as its own thing.
Mm-hmm. Are you kind of enjoying seeing the people have this ongoing conversation about, no, it's about, atomic warfare. Or, no, it's about some dude who just broke up with his girlfriend. Do you like seeing that kind of conversation or do you?
No.
No?
I mean, no, it's good that people do that. I mean, that's great. But personally, for me, as someone watching that happen, it's actually kind of agonizing.
Because it's like you so missed the point, or?
No, I mean, well, that probably happens sometimes, but who am I to say
right.
what people should and shouldn't think about a game, right? But it's just, when you make something that's really complicated, you see it a lot more closely than almost anyone who plays it, right? And so... yeah, I don't know what more to say about it than that, but just that if I were to have a discussion about Braid with clones of me, or imagine there were other people on the development team who had designed it,
right.
It would be really different because we care about different things, I guess. The stuff that people talk about in Braid a lot is the story on its own, separate from the gameplay, or how it's interesting that you can rewind and that's an experimental piece of gameplay stuff. And you can talk about that stuff, but the things that I care about tend to be deeper and subtler and pervasive all through the game. And those are the things that people don't talk about very often, but that's cool. You shouldn't necessarily expect that either. Right. So,
yeah. And then it kind of gets to, I was going to ask you, what are you most proud of? The story, the puzzles, the gameplay, or do you just kind of see them all as one inseparable entity? Yeah,
they're kind of inseparable to me, but also proud of is a weird thing. It's hard for me to say that I'm proud of the game because part of that process of designing it that I was talking about, it was a process of discovery, not necessarily of me creating things that came wholly out of my head, right? I would start with an idea, but then I spend a long time seeing where that idea goes. Hey, if you have rewind, what if some things are immune to that rewind, right? That's one of the early worlds in the game. Spoilers. And then from having that idea, though, a lot of the design process there was exploration, right? And in that process of exploration, I'm kind of just finding things that were already true. Okay, if this conceit happens where some things are immune to rewind, then, well, look, this can happen and that can happen and that can happen. And then I can make puzzles to illustrate those things. But it's I just kind of picked the puzzles, but I didn't pick why the puzzles work or whatever. That was already there in the universe, right? In the way that the world works. So to be proud of that would be proud of something that I don't own exactly.
So it's you're not saying you invented it. You just kind of found it. And
yeah, I mean, maybe I have, rather than, if you have the vision of making a game as I'm building something from scratch in my workshop or whatever, right? That's one kind of game. And this kind of game was more I'm going out on a voyage and discovering things, and I'm picking what direction to go. And maybe I could make better choices and worse choices about what direction. So that's a design skill, right? And then as you navigate your ship, like through there, you're kind of dodging rocks and whatever and making good time, and that's all design skills. But what you find is not really up to you, right? It's either there or it's not there.
Well, that sort of reminds me of like what Stephen King says about writing, which is that, the stories are basically just fossils that he unearths and polishes up and then puts out there for us to read. So I'm kind of curious to take something that Tom Mc Shea has asked me about games before. Do you think Braid was inevitable? Do you think if you hadn't made Braid that maybe somebody else would have come along and maybe the same concepts, maybe a different design or something, but maybe those same concepts would have been elaborated in much the same way?
Like if you put 1,000 monkeys at a keyboard, eventually you'll get Braid.
Well, yeah, the 1,000 monkeys thing is weird. We can talk about that if we were going to tangent on, because that's actually not really true.
Okay.
No, 1,000 monkeys thing. But yeah, so it's weird. I don't know how to answer that question, because my knee-jerk answer is yes, of course, somebody would have done it, right? Maybe it wouldn't have been really the same game, but you would have had a lot of the same things. But then the question is, how long of a time period are we talking about? Because like there had been games that did rewind before Braid, and that's part of where the idea came from. Looking at games like Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, or I don't know. There's a number of games I could mention, right? And so, but nobody had done this thing with it, and yet, so I'm an independent game developer, right? And one of the things we worry about, especially as we're talking about our game in public before it's released, is like, oh my God, is someone going to clone my game? Release it first or whatever, and spoil, and nobody will want to play my game or care that it was first. Well, even after like Braid's been out 3 years, it hasn't been cloned still, right?
There's been
there's been a few games. Like I played an iPhone game made by a guy, and it was really a lot like Braid, but it didn't catch on.
It seemed like there was a time after Braid came out that we just got a lot of it kind of marked this renaissance of side-scrolling puzzle platformers. There's that one.
There's Limbo. Yeah, Limbo gets compared to Braid a lot, and I always thought that was a weird comparison, because Limbo it propels you forward continuously. Like that's what its job is you don't get stuck. And Braid is about stopping and thinking, and then it's all that stuff ties together. The art and the music makes that possible. So it was a weird comparison just because they feel so different, and there's no story, and there's story in one and stuff like that.
But isn't it true that there was like a bunch, like we weren't really getting any kind of that artistic kind of
There's a lot more indie 2D platformers now, but
yeah.
I don't think I've played anything I would say is a clone. I mean, even something like Ratchet and Clank, like that doesn't actually feel anything like Braid. It just has similar time stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're an indie, one of the things that happens is platformers are one of the easiest kinds of games to make. So if you want to do something that has a crazy, gameplay behavior in it, it's pretty easy to do that in a platformer, But I don't know, maybe some of it's direct inspiration. I am the person with the least objective view in the world about this, so I prefer not to speculate and just see how things are.
You're just like, that dude stole.
No, I mean, none of those games you're talking about, though.
Right.
I mean, they're all so different from Braid that I wouldn't consider any of them like a copy or anything.
Are you honored, though, that you could have been an influence?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of what you hope for. Like when you have a creative idea and you're like, I'm going to put this in a game. It's hard work. You have to sustain yourself for years, doing all this hard work. Like nobody really sees what you're doing or understands it, I mean, it's maybe hard to explain now because the game was successful, but it was hard to find people to work on it. Like I spent 2 years trying to find somebody to do the draw the sprites and stuff for the game.
How many? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just because nobody wants to work with who's some independent guy. I'd give them the game. The game was fully there, but they couldn't play it and understand what it was, even though it was there. It was weird, right? I forgot why I said that.
It's probably my fault.
It's still early in the morning for me.
Right.
I had a point behind saying that, but I forget what it was.
We can come back to it.
Yeah.
So you touched on like where you kind of got the idea for some of these mechanics, like Prince of Persia. What would you say like the fundamental, like the earliest kernel of an idea for this game? Where did that come from?
The absolute earliest is really, a couple years at least before I was thinking about the game. There's an old school game designer, Brian Moriarty. I don't know how many people who listen to this podcast know who he is, but
we only have about 4 people who listen to this podcast.
He was back at Infocom in the game in back in the day. He made one of the games that I like the most out of the text adventure genre, which is called Trinity. He made Loom, which was a very forward-thinking graphic adventure, and he was involved in a number of other games. And he was always known for giving very, very good speeches at the Game Developers Conference. Mm-hmm. And one of the ones that he gave, I forget what year it was, mid-2000s sometime, early 2000s maybe. It was called The Secret of Psalm 46, and it was this large, sprawling lecture about, Shakespeare and conspiracy theories and like what games are about and things like that. And one of the points that he made in that speech was that the things that are the best, the things that really affect people in many aspects of society or across the world, the things that have the power to reach out to people are often very generous things, right? They're not stingy things. And that's a very general statement, right? He was talking about it in part with respect to Shakespearean works or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like there's all this stuff. But I thought, I always had in the back of my mind, like, how do you apply this kind of idea to game design, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to claim that Braid is that, because it's not. Braid is a tiny, tiny step toward trying to reach that kind of idea, but applying that idea to Braid, it was just, we look at games like Prince of Persia or whatever that give you rewind, and rewind is really cool, but it's like they have to limit it because that's how they knew how to make a traditional game design out of it. It's like, well, we have to make the jumps and the spikes count. Like if you fall on the spikes and you can rewind an infinite number of times and the spikes aren't something that you're scared of or whatever, and then that ruins the game, right? So, they made it, you run out of sand and then you start dying and then you have to reload, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that made the game design uglier because you took something that we already had, which is lives that you lose, and then you reload, and it made it even uglier by stapling on this extra layer, right, where it should have been cooler. So the fundamental idea behind Braid was, what if we take that attitude of generosity and just apply it to that idea? Like, we're just going to give you as much rewind as you want, mm-hmm. and I'm going to have faith that will come to be a good game eventually, even if I have to throw away every other aspect of traditional game design that I know in order to have that rewind work, mm-hmm. And then all the other details kind of came later. And that actually dovetailed. There was a discussion on a mailing list with some other game designer friends of mine where one of them actually said, every game should have rewind in it. It should just be like a VCR or whatever. You can rewind a movie anytime you want. Why can't you do that with a game? And so those ideas kind of clicked in my head, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm. So like when you're looking at something like rewind or any kind of game design, like when you're designing it, are you thinking, okay, this is what it is, I want to push this forward? Or is it just like, I want to use this, and if it goes forward, good. If not, that's fine too.
It's weird. It's somewhere in between the two things that you said. Like I used to be, back in the mid-2000s and whatever, a big proponent of like experimental gameplay design, right? Like if I design a game, I want it to have some game mechanic that other games haven't had and stuff. And I still think that that's neat, and it's a good thing for people to do. It helps us make games better and explore more of what's out there, right? But I also feel like to some degree that is tangential to what's really important. Like if there's a deep experience you can have playing a game, or an experience that's really going to affect you, it doesn't necessarily have to do with like the mechanics that you're engaging in. Those could aid such an experience, but I feel like the real value is something, it's like the je ne sais quoi that the game has, and like what is that and how do you get it, right? Mm-hmm. You don't get it by giving your character a grappling hook, right?
Right.
That, although the grappling hook might be cool and it might help you get there, how do you get it? It's some other way, right? So, with Braid, obviously it had this gameplay hook, but for me, that's not what makes it. And I'm not going to claim that it's an interesting game for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. But for me as a designer, what makes it interesting is observing the way in which that idea happened. Like I said, you kind of sail out from a point and you see what's there, right? But there is some aspect of, after trying this design idea and then you sail out and you see what's there, you have to kind of decide if what you found was good enough for people to play or not, right? Mm-hmm. So like in Braid, there was a number of worlds, there were at least 2 or 3, that I did the programming for, I did some level design for, and I had some puzzles, and there were at least a few interesting puzzles. But then I said, this either isn't quite in the spirit of the game, of the rest of the game as it's taken shape, or, there's not enough interesting different puzzles here that I know how to find that justify this world's inclusion alongside the other worlds. And so I cut those, right? So it's not to me just about having a cool idea and executing on it a bunch. There's something about there's a lot of things. It gets hard to talk about.
Right.
But there's also what I haven't talked about is, which I don't think games do very often, and I wish they would do more. There's really something about respecting the player's time, right? Like, I'm not going to give you a bunch of puzzles that are just kind of okay and that fill space and make the game bigger, right? Those are out of there. Right, I'm just going to give you the best package that I know how to give you, right? And if that makes it a 4-hour game instead of a 6-hour game or an 8 or 10-hour game, then that's what it is, right? And especially as I get older and I somehow get busier than ever, I wish that I had shorter games to play that were better instead of 40-hour epics that I really liked 6 hours of,
Yeah, I mean, that concept of, what's good enough. How do you know when a puzzle is good enough? Because it's like, it just seems like a very difficult, because when you know the answer to a good puzzle, you're just like, oh, of course that's the answer, Like, how do you go about designing a puzzle? Or is that just like some kind of fundamental, I was born this way, screw you all?
I have no idea. Like, somehow I became a puzzle game designer, right? Because my new game is a puzzle game also.
Right, The Witness.
I didn't think that would be true, but it's been true 2 games in a row. So I've been designing puzzles for like 6 years now straight. So I ought to have something to say about this.
Right. I mean, was puzzle design formative for you? Like, I don't know.
Well, I really liked puzzle games when I was younger, right? The problem is there aren't that many good puzzle games, So, especially since I've been a game designer, I have higher standards for what's a good puzzle game than I used to, right, when I was a kid. But yeah, something about a puzzle that makes it good. So for me, part of it is, at least for the school of thought that I'm in, I want the puzzle to not just be about being tricky, right? Like, I feel like anyone can make a puzzle that's just figure out the series of operations that you have to do, and there's like 12 or 13 steps, and you have to do them in the right order, and then you solve it. Like, that to me is not interesting, because that's isomorphic, big word, to every other puzzle like that in every other game, regardless of the mechanic, right? So my game mechanic could be pushing blocks around, or it could be like opening doors with keys, but you can make the same puzzle in both of those games, and it'll kind of feel the same, and it'll kind of feel tedious, right? So that's a not good puzzle to me. A good puzzle to me is that when you understand it, you not only understand the solution to the puzzle, but that also illuminates something else that you maybe hadn't thought about, that is some other part of the larger world, right? And it's hard for me to come up with examples. Like Portal 2 had a puzzle that I liked. It's really not, for most people, one of the more memorable puzzles, but there's this one where you set up a portal and you have to shine like 3 lasers in it at 3 different angles, and they go through your portal and they come out, right? And then one of them reflects through a cube. And it's like, once you get that, you didn't just solve the puzzle, but you also, there's something in your mind about rays converging and then diverging and passing through a common point. That's interesting, and that's something that you see that you didn't see before you did the puzzle, right? So for me, that is what gives things a little bit of magic, and that's what I'm trying to do, in the new game. Like, every single puzzle has that somehow.
And like tries to teach you how to solve the next puzzle?
Well, no. So there's 2 things. One is it doesn't have to be in a series. Like, it doesn't have to be about the next puzzle at all. Like there's some stuff in The Witness that's just about shadows, for example, and you just might, in the course of doing a puzzle, see something about shadows you hadn't thought about, but it's like, okay, that's cool. And then it doesn't apply to anything else in the game. But also, teaching is not necessarily right, because I feel like when you talk about teaching something, it's almost a little bit condescending. Like, if I can teach you something, then that's something that I understand fully or have mastery over, or whatever. And I always feel like if I can understand something, it's not that important, right? It's not that complicated. The stuff I like to be wrestling with is like the super involved, like things that I can barely reach with my mind, right? And those are things that I can't teach, because I don't have not wrapped around them, right? But what I can do is kind of point at them and say, hey, check out this thing over here. I see this. Do you see this also? Right? And so for me, that's that element of magic that I try to get at with puzzles.
How much do you think the puzzle design in Braid would have changed if you had, say, like the focus testing budget of a company like Valve, who are just so well known for just like scientifically ironing out all the kinks in their puzzle design? They're just constantly pulling data from their games at the points at which people get stuck. Do you think, like, if you had a bigger budget, is that something that you would want to have done?
Not really. At least not in the way that Valve does it, right? So it's interesting. So, I'll say at the very beginning, Valve makes very high quality games. They're known for this, right? A lot of studios wish that they could make games the way Valve does. Valve, though, is in a different business than the business I'm in, right? They're in the business of making a consumer product that the maximum number of people like, right? And I'm not doing that. I'm trying to make the games that I think are going to be the most special or the most interesting. And I think that, and there are people who would argue with me about this, but I think that kind of means that you're not going for the biggest audience. Because as soon as you're trying to please a lot of people, you're kind of not making, decisions from the heart, right? You're not doing the things that you really think need to happen, right? So when I go and I play test a game, I don't do it to see if somebody likes something and change it if they didn't like it. And I don't even necessarily do it to see if somebody gets stuck and make something easier if they get stuck. Because I feel like if I'm making a puzzle game, a legitimate puzzle to me is something that requires observation and effort. And if it's a real puzzle, then you might never solve it if you don't figure it out. And that's what a puzzle is. And to iron out a game to make all the, quote, puzzles so easy that everybody gets to the game, to me is counter to the point of a puzzle game. And I think that you see the results of that kind of design in a lot of games these days, right? Real puzzles have kind of disappeared from most games. So, Valve is doing this thing to make an entertainment product, and I'm, on the other hand, trying to make an art thing. But there is a use for that kind of playtesting, right? Which is that it's a reality check, right? So when I design something, I have in my head, well, people are probably going to come in here and notice this thing and then think this or that and do something, right? And then they'll either understand the puzzle or they won't, or I don't know. But there's some series of ideas that I have about how the player is going to interact with the game, and when it gets play tested, that gets tested, right? And if my ideas were wrong, then I probably need to go revisit the puzzle. So that's very valuable, but I don't think, especially for projects as small as mine, that it's necessary on that kind of scale. And interestingly, the one thing that I think of as a mistake in Braid that I wish I had changed, that I couldn't have really in reality because it would have taken way too much work, and I was basically dead at the end of it. I couldn't do anything more. But the one thing that I wish I had changed, I made the way it was because of playtesting.
Oh, really?
I did too much playtesting early on and took the results too seriously and too much tried to accommodate the way people had played in playtesting and screwed up the game. I mean, not really. I mean, I think it's fine. It's just this one thing.
Can you say what it is, or?
Yeah. So in the first world, there's the first time you come up to a puzzle board, which is you can go interact with the puzzle board and put stuff together. There's 2 puzzle pieces in there that you can't get the first time you see them. Everything else in the game you can get. And the reason this messes up the game is because people understand that they can't get those right now, and they think, well, I'm going to need another power or something. I need to get the pogo stick so I can jump higher or something, right? And then later through the game, there's all this unsureness about whether they can get something or not, right? And eventually they sort of figure out, like, oh, no, I really can get these if I try. Usually they figure that out, right? Now, the reason that I did that is because in playtesting, a large percentage of people early in the first year of the game, out of a 3-year development cycle, a significant percentage of the people, like over half that I played, were very completionist players, probably because they were like game design friends who were like quirky, right? And wouldn't move on if they didn't figure out a puzzle. And I was like, well, I want this to be a little more spacious, a little more nonlinear. So as a design decision, I'm going to put something there that you can't get so that you know that you can pass things and come back to them later, right? And then by the time I decided that was wrong, so the game was just too solid. We were like a month from shipping. The game was too much together, and I would have had to tear apart that entire world, and it would have been terrible. And I just couldn't. I didn't have the energy in me to do it anymore. And I don't think that it, ruins the game or anything like that. But it is, if I were to make that game again, which thankfully I don't have to do, I would have changed that thing. I would have made it so that you could have gotten those, and that I would have figured out how to pace things so that it works out. So yeah, be careful of playtesting.
It's bringing back vivid memories of when I played Braid with my girlfriend, because she is such a completionist in games. She will not leave an area until she collects every last coin, every last collectible.
Yeah, well, and so here's the thing, though, right? So I just said how this decision is wrong, but I say that with reality having been this way, that I made the game this way. If I hadn't made the game this way, maybe I would have been wishing I'd made the game that way, right?
Right.
Because it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Did you expect that you would be making something that people would eventually be calling, this is one of my favorite games of all time? Or did you expect that you would say, hey, this is one of, GameSpot's, nominations for Game of the Year? Or, did you really expect something that would be life-changing for certain? I don't want to say life-changing, but, something that actually did, kind of enter their consciousness and become special for them?
Well, I didn't have that many concrete ideas like that, because I didn't even know this. Remember, go back to 2005, 2006 when I started this, right? Like, independent games kind of weren't a thing still. Like, they were sort of like, hey, I could play a Flash game that's lousy and like nobody cares about it or whatever. Or, there had sort of been this casual games thing that happened on the PC, but then that died out as the business model went away. There wasn't really, until 2008 is sort of the year, I feel like, when that really became a thing, where people in the press or in the public or whatever, like, suddenly understood, oh, you could make good games in this genre, right? And part of it is all the games that hit that year. So there was like, there was N+, there was Braid, World of Goo, Castle Crashers. It was just like a really good year for that size of game. I'm probably forgetting some, right? But so in the environment in which I was making this, I didn't really imagine that it would necessarily get that much attention from people who give out like Game of the Year kind of awards or whatever. I figured that, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to talk about this without thinking like exact sales figures or whatever, but I was thinking that I would do okay if it did about what the average Xbox Live Arcade game would sell at that time. Like, I was thinking the game will be a success if I can do that, because it's independent and it's weird and it's got a low budget and it's arty and all that. However, I did, when I was designing it, my goal was, I want this to be a game that 20 years from now, for some reason 20 was the number,
Right.
People could play and it'll still be worth playing, right? That was, not that 20 years from now people would acknowledge it as being in the canon of games or anything, but just that the design would hold up and what's in it would be interesting for that long. And of course, it's too early to know if that's true or not.
I mean, when you were developing, was there ever a point where you were just like, oh, like, this is good. This might hit it?
Well, so one of the things that people really remember about the game is the last level, right?
Sure.
Spoiler, has the princess in it. And I didn't come up with that until about a year into development. Actually, 8 months into development, but all the rest of the game had been designed. It was like the last thing that I did, and it was a really good ending, and I didn't know about that ending when I started making the game, right? And so when I was designing that, I was like, oh wow, this is really, I think this is going to be good, right? But the rest of it, these games come along so slowly. They get better and better, but you build on them in such minute quantities every day that you just don't see the change, right? And by the time it's cool, you're so used to it that you don't see how it's cool,
Do you have kind of the same mentality for The Witness? Like, is that another game that you think, like, in 20 years, I want people to look back and say, wow, that was special?
Yeah, I hope so. I haven't thought about it in terms that direct now, but I'm thinking, like, it's the same. It's made with the same kind of intention as Braid. Like, yeah, I'm trying to make this thing that's a special package that has all this interesting stuff in it, and I'm trying to make it better than that game, right? Which means, I don't know what it means because it's a different game, right? But it's certainly a bigger game. It's got more stuff in it. It's longer to play. I feel like it's more seasoned or more mature in some ways. I don't know. But apart from that, I've just sort of, I'm being kind of hands off, or I'm not trying to predict too much how the world is going to think about this. Part of it too is because it's very easy. Like people sometimes ask, how are you going to make a game that tops Braid? Or whatever? Because Braid had a really high Metacritic and whatever. And I don't know. And in fact, I don't think that that's really a good way to go.
It seems like it would put a lot of pressure on the situation.
Well, it's not just pressure too, but it's like similar to the playtesting thing. If I'm going to make something new and it's going to be what I really think is important to make, it has to kind of not be what it turns out to be. Has to be not dictated by concerns like that. By like, I have to make something that'll Metacritic over 93, right? I mean, that's just a really silly mission statement.
I mean, that's kind of the EA approach, right? We got to get above 80 on Metacritic.
Yeah, and see how often they don't even do that, right? No, I mean, it's the thing is, even that is hard. Like, if I were to just say, I don't care what I'm making at all, it just has to Metacritic 94, that's hard. Okay? So to do that and at the same time try to make something that I think is important or contributes to games or that is going to make a meaningful experience for somebody out in the world, it's like taking on too much. So the way I'm thinking about it is, you know what? Screw it. I bet this game is going to Metacritic much lower than Braid, and that's okay because I actually think it's better. And what I have learned through this round of discussion and criticism, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, is that what a lot of people see in the game or care about is different from what I see and care about. And so then I have to make a choice. Am I making a game based on what I care about or what other people care about? It's going to have to be what I care about. So yeah, I think, I don't know, I would be happy if this game Metacritic's 94 or 95 or 100, right? I don't think anything's ever gotten 100.
We're getting close. Uncharted 2 is up there.
Yeah. But I realistically don't think that it will, and I won't be surprised if it Metacritic's lower. But I believe that it's a substantially better game, actually. I believe that it's... But the thing is, it's subtler, right? This is one of the reasons why I think, and where these trade-offs come in. Like, Braid has this immediate hook where, like, you hit the button and it rewinds and, like, everything goes backwards, and that all looks cool. The Witness is a lot mellower, and... it's kind of for people with long attention spans.
Always a Metacritic score killer.
Well, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. All that said, though, you know, I just did this press tour, you know, like Sophia Tong came in and played.
We have a preview on the site. Go check it out.
Yeah, and I was surprised by how positively received it was almost across the board. There was one game journalist who clearly didn't really like the game. But everybody else seemed to like it. You know, some people really loved it. And this is at a point where, you know, I've been doing this game the same as Braid, where I didn't really work on production values until we just started like a month ago. So you walk around the world and there's all these buildings. It's like a block that I made in the editor. You know, it's like the walls don't even line up and whatever.
Right.
And it's not trying to look good graphically. It's barely got any sound in it. Like the voice acting is temporary, all that stuff. And people still liked it. So... that's great. That's way better than I expected. So then I feel like once we do all that stuff and take it to that level of experience that you really want to take it, that'll be quite nice. So I don't know. I can't predict.
Are you able to say how production on it's coming along or?
No, it's coming along well. You know, we sort of went into, you know, the game industry has this idea that there's pre-production and then production. And we sort of were in pre-production for like 2 years. But during which time I designed the game. So there's 10 hours of gameplay or something like that there of solving these puzzles, each of which has a unique thing to bring to the table, and there's no filler and all that. And I'm very happy about that. We just have a lot of work to do now. Like taking that open world environment and making it look good and just giving that visual interest. Like I walk into a new location and I'm just interested by what the structure looks like and how it's painted and stuff. Like that's a lot of work, as anyone who makes games knows.
Is it the same? Like, it seems like that would be the comparably easy stuff. Like,
well, it is the
more of like not to demean or belittle your artist, but it's just like more of the rote activity of, all right, let's just make this look cool. How hard could it be?
Well, for sure, that's the kind of thing that we've been doing for decades in video games, right? And there's a lot of experience that game design or game makers have about what works and what doesn't, and we can draw on all that, and that makes it easier. However, this is a really tricky game. This game is hard in some ways, and it's hard to say why without spoiling it really badly.
Please don't spoiler.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. But we're very limited in what we can make. Like, we can't just paint anything on the wall. Like, there's all kinds of things we have to stay away from. There's a very rigid art style that we're keeping to, and that's making it a little more challenging, but it also makes it really interesting. At the same time, we're still figuring out, we're an independent developer. The budget for this game is much higher because Braid was successful, but it still is negligible compared to like Uncharted 3's budget or something like that, right? And so what we realistically can do is limited. So there's still this challenge of we have to come up with an art style that looks good, is different from what you've seen in any other game, and yet is also achievable by a small team, right? And that's hard by itself, right?
Right.
So, if you stack that, plus I want a Metacritic 94, plus, I don't know. It's too many hard things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So the game, you're shooting for 2012?
2012. Hopefully it'll be out or close to out a year from now at this time. But
And still don't know platforms. You're still pondering.
Still pondering.
Before we move on to other stuff, I have one more question.
Sure.
What if there's something out there that you don't have time for, you can't make? What is that? Is there anything that's just like, man, I wish I could do that, but I have everything else going on, or like something that, man, I wish these guys would make this? Or
So I have this file that I type in game ideas so that I can come back to them later and make them someday. I don't remember how many are in there because I haven't counted lately, but it's at least 110 games that I would like to make. And they're all, maybe half of those are just ideas that wouldn't turn out to be that good, but a lot of those could be combined with other ideas or some things. There's at least 50 solid games in there that are like Braid or The Witness quality, if I could sit down and do them. And that's just the thing, is they take years, and how I can only make them at a certain rate. So
that's probably pretty funny or fun, because I'm sure like you've started this like many years ago. Do you go back and be like, oh man, I can't believe I thought that would be a good idea at the time?
No, it's not usually like that.
Okay.
But it does tend to be sometimes like I start something out and it's kind of a cool idea, but it doesn't go far enough to really make a game that would be at the quality level that I want it to be. But then I'm just like, oh, I'll give it time and I'll have faith that it'll work itself out. And then it never does. Like 10 years later, or not 10 years, but 5 years later, I'll come back to it and it's like, yeah, I still don't know. Still don't know where this can go.
Don't have the hook for that one yet.
Yeah.
Do you ever look at anybody else's game and think, wow, I wish I'd come up with that. I wish that would have
Like,
been
I gotta
my
scratch
thing.
it off my list now.
Well, there's one game made by a friend of mine. It's not out yet, but Miegakure. You guys know this game? It's a 4-dimensional puzzle platformer.
I don't.
It's actually 4-dimensional, right? But you can only see 3D at once. You rotate your view between dimensions.
I did hear something about it. I don't know much about it though.
Yeah, it's made by a guy named Mark Ten Bosch. He actually lives in Berkeley. And
say the name again.
Mark Ten
Or
Bosch.
the name of the game.
Miegakure.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm awful with pronunciation.
Yeah. That I think will be out next year as well. But that's cool. But the other thing, there aren't really that many ideas where people do them and I say, I wish I did them, but I get excited about stuff sometimes, right? So I was playing the new Deus Ex game, and I'm going to refrain from commenting much on that. But it got me excited about the stealth genre again, and I was like, for my next game, I could totally do a stealth game. And the past week or two, I've totally planned out a stealth game that is also... It's at the same time a stealth game, but it's a stealth game that nobody's ever done, and that's fundamentally different in a certain way that I think would put it up there in the league of games that people really care about. So now I'm hyped to do this game.
Right.
But I'm in the middle of the current project.
Rid of this
and it's
Witness.
like, totally. No, that's how it is, actually. And it's hard to make it not dreadful at some point, finishing a game. Because most of the creative stuff in The Witness is finished now. Like, all the cool ideas are kind of in there. And now it's like, well, we got to do all the hard work now.
Right.
Now that you've done, now that you've done you've done Braid and you're working on The Witness, do you think you're a harsher critic when it comes to other people's work? Now that you've kind of fleshed out your own stuff?
No, because I've always been a harsh critic of both other people's work, but also of my own stuff. And I think that's, like, I have a little bit of a reputation, especially among independent game developers, but also on the wider internet, for being a harsh critic. Like, I'll just say stuff about some game that I didn't like. But that's, that stuff that's the way my mind works, but it's also the way my mind works about my own things, right? So it's kind of, people sort of interpret it as me being a jerk, but it's actually like, it's just kind of what it means to have certain level of quality standards over what you think should get done, right? And that's been helpful to me, right? Because Braid, I think if I didn't have that kind of take something apart and see what's good about it and what isn't good and what has no excuse for not being better, kind of a thing, I think the game wouldn't have, in my eyes, been as good as it came out. So. Yeah, I don't know. It is what it is.
All right, let's move on. We also want to talk about some other games, like normal podcasty HotSpot stuff. So we're going to move on to new releases. Tom Mc Shea, you have been playing Gunstringer?
The Gunstringer.
The Gunstringer. And as a little birdie told me that this is the game that convinced you that Kinect isn't garbage.
Well, yeah, that was the reference to the crow in my mouth 45 minutes ago.
Oh.
Which I was weird that Kevin didn't pick up on right away, since that only means one thing.
I picked up on it. I I wanted to let everybody be confused.
I was thinking of Crow from The Longest Journey.
Yeah,
He's
that
been
makes
on my
sense.
mind
I would
lately.
totally make a reference like that. That makes perfect sense. So, there's a song on the internet called Tom Mc Shea Hates Kinect.
That's
Because
true.
I kind of hate that peripheral because it sucks and it's broken. That's the only reason why.
Right. It's fairly negligible.
The Gunstringer is awesome.
Yeah.
It's like a forced scrolling shooter where you run automatically, and then your right hand, you make it look like a gun, and you go pew pew.
You don't
and
have
shoot
to make
stuff.
it look like.
Cool kids do.
Okay.
So you sweep, and you can get like 6 enemies at once, like Child of Eden, and you flick your wrist and you shoot them. Your left hand is like holding the crossbar of the marionette, and you pull up to jump, and you move left and right to dodge, and it all works. And it's weird because Kinect stuff does not work ever, and this actually works.
Do you have any experience with Kinect, or have you messed around with it at all? Or
I was going to develop a Kinect game simultaneously with The Witness. And I got the dev kit, and I was just like, it's going to take a lot of work to make this accurate and to do what we wanted to do. So I just decided it was too much to try and do right now.
Okay. Yeah, because I know people have hacked the Kinect, and it's got like all this potential.
it's not
Like,
even
it could
hacking
do-
anymore. I think
It's not even hacking. It's
Yeah.
Microsoft actually released stuff for the PC, but it works. Like the hardware is actually good, and every single game that comes out where you have direct control over your character, so it's like ignoring Dance Central or whatever, doesn't work. And I've railed about this on the podcast because I keep playing these games and there's like a 3-second lag, and it's awful. So I'm playing this and I'm just shocked because it's not only does it work, but it's really fun. Like all of the game is fun, and it like redeems Twisted Pixel, who's had a couple like games I didn't like in a row, and it redeems them because it's funny and it's atmospheric and it's like all these things I expect from them, and I don't know. I'm just like shocked.
It's an on-rail shooter,
Basically.
and it has the same fundamental mechanic of I'm going to lock on to all these targets and then fire.
Yep.
I mean, and that's enough. That's all you needed from Kinect.
I guess. Well, it's because the core gameplay. I mean, it works and it's fun and it's varied enough that you're not doing the same thing over and over again. And then when you combine it with the presentation, and it has a narrator similar to Bastion, and it has a great soundtrack, and it has like really cool unlockables. So when you combine it with all this, like it's just a really good package.
I see.
But it's just also the novelty of like the controls make it better. Like if this was with a controller, I wouldn't like it as much. Like the novelty of doing this stuff, I like that. And I totally understand why people are making excuses and kind of just being disingenuous about their experience with the Kinect so far because they want to like it so much. They're excusing the 3-second delay. So like now I'm finally playing something that works. It's like, okay, I totally understand why this thing sold and why people play it and why people want more games, because when it works, it's really fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things where like if you have a Kinect, I urge you to buy this game because I want more. I want developers to realize if they make a game that's actually good, then it'll sell. Like I want them to put effort into this stuff instead of just crapping stuff out. So this is a really important game to buy if you like the Kinect.
I wonder if this is a game that could have existed at the launch of the Kinect, or if this is
Yeah.
so much influenced by or learning the lessons of the failures of some of those launch games.
Yeah.
Because I still have nightmares about the first-person paintball minigame in Deca Sports Freedom.
Yeah, I mean, I have nightmares about Sonic, and I reviewed Kung Fu Panda, and it's like, I play these games, and I just do not understand how people like them, because I'm such a control freak. Like, that's my thing. So it's like, I don't understand how people can just be like, no, the controls are busted, I still like the game.
But that's the thing. The best games for Kinect so far are ones where you don't actually wield direct control over what's happening on screen. That's why I think Kinectables works.
Yeah, and
Because you don't really have an avatar on screen that needs to
Plus,
do exactly what
Kinectimals
you're doing.
is adorable.
Well, it is adorable.
Aside
but
from that.
that's something else.
yeah. So yeah, this is cool, and yeah, and I'm totally eating crow, and I'm actually like interested, like maybe other developers out there are competent enough to make something good. Like maybe they'll actually care about this stuff instead of just like people will buy it because there's no games that connect.
Well, do you think I'm curious what Jonathan thinks about this too? Like I've always kind of imagined that one of the pratfalls of any kind of motion control, whether it be Kinect or whether it be Move or whether it be the Wii, like is part of it just like developers think of like this motion equals this press on a thumbstick, and this button press equals this, as opposed to actually having to rethink the entire process because the way you interact with the interface is actually quite different.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I can't tell you what the mainstream game designers tend to think because I'm pretty different from them. But one thing that was an early clue that a lot of people are thinking about it in the wrong way is when they start talking about like gesture recognition and stuff, which the same thing happened on the Wii, right? Mm-hmm. A gesture is something where you do the full thing and then it recognizes it, and then it does something, and that's useless.
That's where the delay comes in.
The joy of using your body is not about that, right? And if you're going to do that, if you're going to make a discrete gesture and then it recognize it, that becomes the same as pushing a button at that point, right? Whereas what like the analogness of like here's where my hand is and I can move it anywhere, right? That's where it becomes different from a button or a stick control or whatever, right? So it's obvious, I think it's obvious as a designer that that's what you want. You don't, and the voice recognition stuff that Microsoft keeps pushing is the same way. Like if I have to say like lightsaber on to turn on your lightsaber, right? Like that takes 4 seconds to say that. And nothing happens while you're saying it, and then maybe it recognizes it, and maybe it does.
But think about how badass you feel when you're like, lightsaber on!
You feel zero
if you're
badass.
6 years old. Yeah.
Which I kind of am.
No, I mean, that kind of thing, it just doesn't... I mean, I know why they did it. They did it so that you need somehow way to issue controls, but it just doesn't really work in gameplay for the most part.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying for 5 years that the Wii came out too soon. Because Nintendo didn't have any ideas besides Wii Sports and what to do, because there's developers have been making games a certain way for 25 years, 30 years, and all of a sudden they're like, think about it this way. And nobody did, including Nintendo, except for Wii Sports. So like it almost feels like this year we might actually get developers who've been thinking for 5 or 6 years about motion controls, making games that are better because they're fundamentally built from the ground up for motion controls. We have Gunstringer, we have Zelda coming out, which looks awesome because of how they're using the controls. And I'm thinking there might be a revolution with this recently, or coming soon. I'm hoping, because up until now it really has just been like flick to the left and you do this stupid movement screen, and it's what Kevin was talking about, and that's not what makes games fun. So I don't know. I'm optimistic now.
I'm a big fan of the thing what happens in games where you press a button and the thing happens immediately when it's supposed to happen.
I like that.
And I mean, you get problems like that even in button control games. I mean, you just played Blood Rain, and that game's a mess. Because the things that happen when you press the button may or may not happen, and I don't know. I don't like games that take control away from me. Like that's why I always go on rants about long knockback attacks and stuff like that, where the experience is taken away from me when I want to be interacting with the game rather than waiting for the game to allow me to interact.
Or like that slow motion, like when it was in Warhammer, like in that kill shot, it would just like slow down for the hardcore effect of you like braining some orc. It was in the Thor game too. Right?
I get why developers do that because it looks all cinematic and cool, and people want to revel in the gore and things like that. But the stuff I mean is more like when, like I just played Hard Reset, right? Mm-hmm. And when I want to switch to a weapon, I want to be able to switch to a weapon. I want to push the button and then there maybe there's a little tiny bit of animation that's left in the shot or whatever, and then it switches to the weapon. I don't want to have to press the button multiple times because the developer said to himself at some point, you know what, my fancy animation is more important than the player's ability to interact with my game at this moment. That's the Monster Hunter and the Lost Planet way of developing games as well, which is like our challenge is going to be from taking control away from the player rather than actually making our game challenging. And Blood Rain was the same thing.
Yeah, that game is torture. So how do you approach controls with the game? Because, Braid feels really good. It doesn't feel anything like Mario, but, it feels really good, and it communicates what it wants really quickly.
Yeah, well...
how important is that for you?
Part of this actually ties back to the Kinect thing, too, right? Mm-hmm. Part of what makes a game feel good is that it's fair, right? Assuming the game is like judging you about doing something right or wrong, which a lot of games do, right? Mm-hmm. And part of being fair is that what you ask the player to do, you provide the facility for them to do, and that you don't, you don't screw with that ability, right? So, I mean, in Braid, like, I don't know. hard to explain, but, there's, even though it's not an action game, there's a certain level of action stuff that happens. But there's also things that I don't give you the ability to do that are very conscious choices. Like, so if you look at the Mario games, you hold the jump button longer to jump higher, right? That is not in Braid at all, right? And people complain about that sometimes. They're like, oh, this game sucks. You can't, but I was like, no, because part of what makes the controls feel good, right? Part of it is just responsiveness and all this stuff, right? Like, okay, just because we're playing a landing animation doesn't mean you can't start running or whatever. And like all that stuff, if you go back to like the late 90s, early 2000s, when like third person action games were first starting, like they all did that all the time. Like, you're getting ready to jump, so you can't cancel your jump and turn left and run or whatever. And then game designers learned that had to be better, right? But sometimes what you don't put in is important. So like, because you can't jump a variable distance in Braid, that makes the controls feel good in a certain way because they never introduce confusion about whether you should be trying to jump higher. So you don't get negative feelings about jumping, I guess. I don't know. That kind of
that makes
diverged
perfect
pretty far from
sense.
what we're talking
No,
about.
that actually makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I guess for me, there's like a huge difference between good enough controls and like great controls. And I think of two similar games. I love N Plus and I love Meat Boy. But going back to N Plus after Meat Boy is kind of impossible for me because Meat Boy it's very close to perfect, and N Plus is kind of quirky at times.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's interesting like when developers like really go the extra mile, I think, and just make it feel right. Outland did that earlier this year, and I really appreciate that. And Braid was a similar thing where I never thought about the controls, and I like that.
A lot of people actually complain about the controls.
Yeah.
When you read complaints, and it's just, I don't know. I think sometimes you either like a game or you don't, right? And when you don't like it, you look for ways to describe what you don't like about it. And sometimes those are closer to the real reason, and sometimes they're not, right? I don't know.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think games need to be upfront about what the rules are that they're working with and what tools you have as the player, and then always being consistent with how they work. Because then when games go out of their way to, like Deus Ex Human Revolution, for example, in the first boss fight, it changes its rules. And that kind of thing really bothers me in games, where suddenly, okay, now I can't get close enough even if I'm behind you and you don't see me, because the developers decided that if I get close enough, he's always going to see me and he's going to grab me and he's going to punch me. Right? So and so the game changes the rules on me, the player, even though I've come to understand a very different set of rules up to that point. So that's, I mean, I don't know. It seems weird to complain about Braid's controls because they feel fine. They feel great. So I don't know.
So back to the Gunstringer. You said that if you have a Kinect, then totally pick this up. Conversely, is this worth picking up Kinect for?
I still hate the Kinect, so I'm not gonna. I already bought the Kinect and sold it to a listener. Thank God.
That's
I'm not
true.
gonna repurchase it for this game.
You sold it for like some clams and a.
I sold it for $150 and
bands.
a DualShock 3. Like I made out ahead on the deal, but
exploitation of.
He threw in a DualShock 3. It was not DualShock 3.
Okay.
6-axis. I like the 6-axis. If you really like the idea of motion controls and you really like the idea of the Kinect and you want to see this whole thing pushed forward and made into a legitimate way to control games, I would recommend spending $190 for this and for the Gunstringer and the Kinect. Yeah, and I do think that there is an actual future for motion controls at this point.
Yeah, you've been convinced. Potential is finally there.
Zelda's also pretty cool, and I like some of the move stuff. Like I think that there is potential. Developers just have to rethink, and they can't just tack it onto old games.
So speaking of Zelda, we're going to move on to news. Tokyo Game Show has kicked off, kind of, not quite, sort of. There's pre-Tokyo Game Show-ness going on yesterday or last night or whatever the hell time it is in Japan. They had their pre-Tokyo Game Show press conference. Many believed that they would use it to announce this newfangled 3DS hardware redesign, but actually, and while they did finally announce that clip-on to the 3DS, mostly what they talked about was games. We got I think Iwata kind of just ran through, 10, 15 different games that are
14 sequels, and then the one new IP.
What's that?
It's the one new IP and a bunch of sequels.
I mean, we've got He dated Super Mario 3D Land for November 3rd, announced a new soccer game, announced Cul-de-Sac for the 3DS.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
Cul-de-Sac.
Concept. I'm a Cul-de-Sac guy.
New Fire Emblem, Dynasty Warriors, Bravery Default Flying Fairy.
There's the
SD
new IP.
Gundam G. Project Mariah. A lot of these are Japan focused. Cinder Life, Love Plus, Snake Eaters coming this winter, and Monster Hunter 4. So
I like how you just like tossed in the one that like,
and of course there was.
that's gonna swing the
Monster Hunter 4.
the portable battle in Japan because they love their Monster Hunters.
They do love their Monster Hunter. Is this going to swing the portable battle everywhere? I don't know.
Well, America doesn't care about Monster Hunter.
Well, yeah, obviously. But is this emphasis on the games instead of the hardware? Because I think people are like, hey, give us new hardware, and then it'll sell.
It's still, I mean, I'm going to sound like a jerk. It's still like, what, would you list 7 games, and how many of them are interesting? Like,
Nice.
it's still just like...
I don't know if that was a comprehensive list.
It's not...
I rattled them off.
The only game that jumped out to me is Cul-de-Sac, and I'm actually going to buy it because I already own Cul-de-Sac.
Yeah, and-
Saga. I don't really need another Cul-de-Sac, so it's like, okay. I mean, Fire Emblem will be cool. I'm sure I'll like it, but it's... I don't know. Give me something like...
Is it weird that, I mean, the basics of this system, take out the 3D, are essentially the same as the DS, right? But I look at the DS and I can think of, like, bunches of really interesting, games that use the touchscreen in really interesting ways. And now I see all these 3DS titles, and you think with all this time to just basically iterate and come up with new ideas for the touchscreen, all we're basically seeing is all this stuff that's a remake of this, and we're adding a circle pad because now we want you want to play Monster Hunter, and this is all very traditional games being put on the
It's
3DS.
surprising.
Which it really, I mean,
It's 7 years since the DS came out, and the iOS has been huge for 4 or 5 years. It seems like the touch should be more interesting. I've yet to see the touch used better than Kirby Canvas Curse, which came out in March 2005.
yeah, and now
Like,
they're
I-
adding a circle pad. Like what happened to games like I don't know, Ninja Gaiden on the DS that used the touchscreen in really interesting
Yeah.
ways, or
I don't know.
that stupid Daffy Duck game. But you know what I mean?
Duck and Muck.
Yeah, I mean there were really interesting and clever uses of the touchscreen, and now all this stuff is just like, this is just a regular game. It just happens to be on the 3DS.
Jonathan, do you think anything around getting your games on the 3DS, is that even remotely interesting to you? Or is that platform even remotely interesting from the perspective of a developer?
It's not really something that I think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the feature of it, right? The big one is the 3D display, which I just don't care about 3D very much.
Right.
So
Is that kind of from the people that you know, is that a common sentiment?
yeah, I mean, I think among the developers that I know, the ones who are actually interested in game design, right? These aren't suits or whatever.
Right.
Nobody really cares about the 3D. It's like a novelty that you see once or twice. You're like, okay, that's cool. Now what can I do with this that I couldn't do before? And I don't know
That list
anyone
is
who has an
very
answer
short.
to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the meanwhile, it kind of gives you a headache, or it's out of focus, or whatever.
Yep.
So, from your perspective, how much has the success of iOS impacted the current state of the 3DS? I mean, do you feel like there's a sort of exodus of creative ideas shifting towards these smaller package iPhone games, and so it's kind of hurting the appeal of the 3DS?
Well, I think that if you just look at what's available on the platforms, right? There's no contest, right? There's way more creative games available on iOS, like for some value of like creativity, right? Which I'm not gonna try to defend, but-
Right.
And so why is that? Well, I don't exactly know, right? But it is true. And when I'm thinking about what am I going to do with The Witness, well, the iPad seems like a really good platform for it. Even though it's a first-person 3D game, I don't think I would try to make it on the 3DS. I don't. And of course, though, I mean, among all these people that I know, and myself included, like if it becomes a very successful platform, like a way that you can reach a lot of people, then it's something that you think about. Like, hey, let me release my game on there. Like with the original DS, I didn't really care about the fact that it had 2 screens. I thought that was kind of silly, right? But it turned out to be a platform that a lot of people have, and so then it's like, well, if you want to reach an audience, then it makes sense, right? So that's the way that I see it. Like, if it becomes a platform that lets you reach an audience, great. And if it doesn't, which it doesn't seem to be so far, although with this price cut, maybe it's going that way. I don't know.
What do you think the tipping point will be? Like, do you guys look at it as far as success goes in terms of installed base? Is that...
No, I mean that's a number that you can look at, but what you really do is I think you look at other similar games to what you might be doing and see, did they succeed or did they just totally fail terribly? Nice. And that's a little hard. Like, I don't actually know what those numbers are for the 3DS.
I think they're around like currently 5-6 million, somewhere around there.
Oh, like install base?
Yeah.
Are there a lot of similar games to The Witness on the 3DS?
No.
Is Cubic Ninja basically the same thing?
No. You need. Well, I mean, I guess in that sense, like having publishers like EA or Activision like leading the charge. Would you say like indie developers kind of look to them to kind of
Well, that's
blaze
actually
the trail
true.
For you?
That is a little bit true.
Yeah.
It's not super true, right? I mean, in reality, the number of indie developers who target the 3DS is pretty low anyway. Who would, because it's just a platform that's more serious to develop for, right? If you have a low budget and not a lot of time, you're probably releasing on the PC or on iOS or something, you know. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to be on that platform, you probably look at what EA has released and see how it's sold and stuff.
The heck is EA even released? Like that stripped Madden game? Anything else?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the problem with the 3DS. Who has released anything
Activision,
for that?
Did they even release Transmorphers for this? I don't even know. No one's supporting this thing, including Nintendo.
Yeah.
Who does Lego?
Warner Brothers.
Oh, Warner Brothers. That's right.
Capcom is pretty big into the 3DS, and Ubisoft as well. Those are sort of
Right.
Well, the fighting games seem to be finding a home on the 3DS, which seems really odd.
Yeah.
Considering
since I
the
wouldn't wanna-
DS
Well, I
was
mean-
not exactly a...
Well, I also wouldn't want
I
to play a
guess-
fighting game on that controller.
Considering what Jonathan just said, like Street Fighter has kind of blazed that trail. So now people are more like, oh, it looks like Street Fighter
the problem
fighting
is
games are working.
That would be like looking at, like, if you're an indie developer making a fighting game, you're like, oh, Street Fighter's a success. That would be like saying, oh, Mario's a success. We can make a
We can
2D
do-
platformer.
Yeah,
There are
that's true.
certain things that only sell because of their name, regardless of quality. Not to say Street Fighter isn't great. So, yeah, it's completely different in comparison.
And that goes back, too, to what I was saying about, like, suddenly the 3DS is being seen as just some traditional platform that just happens to have two screens, as opposed to the DS, which seemed to be a home for quirky games that thought about game design in different ways because you had tools that you didn't have on other platforms. Where suddenly now, hey, we're going to add a circle pad, now you're just going to get the experience you can have anywhere else.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? Going back to the DS versus the PSP, right? You know, even way back then, I was thinking about doing a little indie game, releasing it on one platform or the other, and it was clear to me that Sony had a really weird stance with the PSP. Their whole thing was, hey, it's just like a PS2, but it fits in your pocket, and you can play all these racing games and stuff, right? And you look at the DS, and it was stuff like Advance Wars or whatever, which is something you can pull out, play on the bus for a couple of rounds, and stick back in your pocket, right? It's not. There's certain kinds of games that are like that, and there's certain kinds of games that are trying to be the all-consuming experience that makes more sense in your living room or whatever.
Right.
At least speaking culturally in America.
Right.
I don't know how it is in Japan. And it feels like because the hook of the 3DS is the 3D display, that the games are kind of going more back in that direction where they're trying to wow you with what's on the screen, as opposed to like, let's find something that just makes sense as a portable game, you know.
But do
And
they
so
even?
I feel like they're pulling a PSP with their new line.
Do they
agree,
even have
totally.
that option anymore with like the iOS coming out? Because it's like if you can release a simple game like Advanced Wars that's very portable for $4 on the iOS, it seems like you have to justify your $40.
Couldn't
game.
you release a simple game like Advance Wars for $4 on the 3DS if they had an actual like store that worked well that people used and was easy to connect to?
That's opening up the whole can of worms.
Well, no, it's. I mean, I talked about this before it came out. It's fundamentally flawed because the online store sucks.
Yeah.
And the hardware is too powerful. And I talked about this before it came out. Like, I had foresight that Nintendo, who's so much richer and smarter than me, did not. Because now when you have a powerful hardware, you make games like, the next Zelda game is going to be closer to Ocarina than, A Link to the Past. And I think that's a huge problem with this system, is it's expensive to make these games. And it's 40 bones, and I don't want to spend 40 bones on these games.
Not when you can get something so similar on iOS.
I know. You can get Sword and Sorcery for how much money is that? Like $1 or $10 or something?
$2 or something?
It's why am I going to spend 150 plus 40 for these games?
And I'd love to see it go even further, because even Apple is traditionally like they still have to certify everything before it even shows up on the store. I mean, I loved it like with Android. Like, that's even more open for developers to just stick stuff on Android.
For good and bad.
For good,
Right, for good and bad. But
Get
I'm
some
saying,
good baby shaking sims in there.
if
I'd
we
love
had,
to download a great Trojan virus.
I mean, you
My
know,
favorite kind
if
of virus.
I mean, I'm not saying you should take it, away
Yeah.
the certification process, but it would be nice if we had a console that also allowed us to download relatively simple games. I mean, you look at Xbox Live, and you've still got all these independent games on the over on the community channel or whatever they call that. That's relatively inexpensive. And, you get these young developers that get a chance to kind of play around with what they want to do and release the game over
Yeah.
there.
Well,
it would be nice to have that on handheld.
I guess with the 3DS, my question is, like, if you're a developer and you're making an original game, you're not porting a game. Why would you make a game on the 3DS? Because you could make a very similar game for the cost on the PS3, or you can make 20 games on the iOS. Like what do you? I mean, is this a crazy perspective, or is this?
It's lower
what do you think
risk
about
for
this?
the developer and for the player, right?
There's so much risk, and I don't understand the 3DS. I don't understand why anyone would make a game for it. Like that's the thing that has no one has answered for me.
Maybe you want to get into console development. You see this as like more of a stepping stone.
Because it's
Well, that's what the Scribblenauts guys did, right?
that's the DS though, which is significantly cheaper. So if you're a console developer, why would you choose the 3DS over the PSN?
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Or
I don't know. I don't know if you do.
Or a budget priced like EDF Insect Armageddon, like that's a budget priced 360 game as opposed to a full price 3DS game. Like I don't like. Do you have an answer for this, Jonathan? Like why a developer would choose the 3DS at all as a non-port? Because I understand porting games too. I just don't understand this.
He's got nothing.
Sometimes Sony might come to a developer with incentives, like,
Okay.
hey, we'll subsidize your 3DS game or something.
Well, we see with the Vita that they have a great first-party support and questionable
Sorry,
third-party
I
right
just
now.
said Sony, right? Nintendo.
Yeah.
Right.
We know what you meant.
But it's Sony's in a similar position. I just think they have a significantly better online infrastructure, so you can have 10 and under games.
So we're going to
also.
move on past this, so we can hit at least one more news topic.
Nintendo
Tom.
wishes they could do that, but
so
they can't.
I'll give you guys the options. We can either talk about game industry tax breaks,
Nope.
used game sales,
Nope.
how it's costing
Boring.
people, or future of consoles with no discs.
Those are all boring
All
things.
these suck.
Jonathan gets to decide. You guys, I don't care about what you got to say.
I have a lot to say about that last one. Actually.
Okay.
Okay. So future of consoles without
I mean,
discs.
I could rant for like 2 hours about this one.
You've
but
got
I'm not
about
going to.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
Just to set it up, THQ's let me see, THQ CEO Brian Farrell was at he was talking to GameIndustry.biz at the Cloud Gaming USA conference, and he says Farrell argued that the lack of a physical component would save money all around the industry. Hardware makers would need to include disk drives in their machines, which would make the unit cheaper, which is questionable. As for developers and publishers, the lack of something tangible would mean avoiding the costs currently associated with producing, storing, and shipping inventory. A cloud-based gaming industry would also change the way game creators interact with their players. So, with that said, what is your take on this whole?
Well, so originally, I don't understand why it's news, because he's just saying what everybody knows.
Right.
However, you guys.
It's news because people click on it.
Yeah, well, you guys had this news story posted, and there were all kinds of comments on there. You know, I did prep. I went there and I
Right.
read, and there were a bunch of comments that were just like, Psh, never going to happen, or whatever. Like,
Wow.
I need my. Yeah, that's the comments that I saw. Anyway,
Very
the 1 or
short-sighted.
2 pages.
You know what also
Yeah.
would never work? MP3s from music.
No,
Never going to
totally.
catch on. I want an album.
No, it's so funny because people say like, "Oh, I just need to have the physical thing," and I'm just
Right.
thinking that's like what your grandpa says. Like, I just don't trust a phone where the wire doesn't go into the wall or whatever. It's
very
like
true.
so that's part A. So part B is just
Grandpa's paranoid.
yeah
He's also senile. Leave him alone.
Yeah.
yeah.
Too soon, Magrino.
It's a weird thing because you look at the retail chain, right? You have all these parties involved in like how a game gets to people, and the last couple of parties in the chain, the distributor and the retailer, right? The distributor is the guy who trucks all these boxes around everywhere, and the retailer's like the guy working at GameStop who like goes and opens your game and takes out the free online coupon and like gets it dirty and then puts it back in the box and sells it to you as new.
That's his main job.
Right. So that's his value. All that stuff is really expensive, right? And it's inevitable. It's like, sometimes capitalism works well and sometimes it doesn't. But what it does is it tries to eliminate inefficiencies like that, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that. Like that is going to go away. And GameStop knows that. That's why they bought an online download service, right? Mm-hmm. But the last part is just, I kind of don't know how to do this without launching into a horrible rant. But look, okay. So hopefully many listeners are familiar with the concept of peak oil, right? Mm-hmm. This is going to seem like a tangent, but it really isn't. So right, peak oil is not necessarily about you run out of oil, but like that at some point there's oil still in the ground, but it's so hard to get it that you spend more energy getting it than you do actually, than you can produce, right? So you start looking at how you solve peak oil, and there's all these plans people have that involve all these other energy sources. But what inevitably happens is that those energy sources don't add up to how much we have been spending, right? So there's this idea called peak energy, which is that possibly a few years ago, like in 2006, the amount of energy spent per person in America, at least, has peaked, and you will never again for the rest of human history have that much energy to spend. And it'll continue to go down for a while. This may or may not be true. It could be disrupted by various things. But the point being that producing all this plastic crap that gets shipped out everywhere in the world, it's horrible for the environment. And it uses all this energy in a very wasteful way. And, just so you can feel good that you have a piece of plastic crap on your shelf that doesn't mean anything because you could have downloaded it.
Right.
It's really horrible and wasteful, right? And in fact, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we don't destroy the world in the next 50 years. Mm-hmm. And this is a key component of the answer. We figured out what people 100 years ago couldn't have imagined. You can have books and music and these weird interactive, amazing video game things in your house, non-physically. They get there. The transport is basically free, and you have all this knowledge at your disposal. And the fact that people are complaining about the fact that we live in the future and everything is amazing is just kind of horrible. The fact that they want to destroy the earth further so that they can have a little plastic thing on their shelf. I have no sympathy for that.
All right, we're gonna take some live calls. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, wow.
Stephen Gillespie, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hey, Stephen, what's going on? You are talking to the Hotspot. We've got Jonathan Blow here, Tom Mc Shea, Kevin VanOrd, and Shaun McInnis, who just went to the loo.
Yeah, Tinkling Shaun McInnis.
Yeah. So what's going on, man?
I'm a bit upset that Sean's left, but
He'll be back.
I have to live with that.
He's pretty quick. I don't know.
He doesn't piss around, you could say. So.
Right. What do you got for us, buddy?
I've just got a question for the whole panel, especially Jonathan Blow.
Yeah.
What puzzles and games have really stood out for you? For example, I know that Mc Shea has spoken on the Hotspot about the moat puzzle in God of War 2 with the body.
As far as what's a good puzzle that you didn't make, presumably?
In a recent game or
whatever.
Any game.
I don't really know, man. I mean, it's like I said, I'm pretty critical of things. When you hear the part about what I think makes a good puzzle, it'll actually be kind of clear why I don't like most puzzles in games at that point. Mm-hmm. And most of the games that I'm playing lately, I've played a few puzzle games lately that I think are pretty cool. They're not out yet, though. I'm playing them for festival judging. So the IndieCade Festival comes up in a month and a half or something, and I played some interesting games for that. There's a game called The Swapper. You can at least find videos on YouTube about that. It's a game where you can create clones of yourself and you control them all at once, and you transfer control to different ones, and that's pretty cool. I've been playing Fez, which is a game that people who follow indie games may know about.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the twisting 2D one, which
right.
has several different. Yeah. Spin round.
That's actually nearing completion, and I've had fun playing that. What else? I feel like there's something else. Antichamber, which is a really nice indie game, also not out yet, but hopefully will be out by next year, has some really interesting puzzles in it that I haven't seen anywhere. I mean, he sort of brings in a new gameplay mechanic that I don't want to spoil, but at first you think, okay, well that's pretty straightforward, and I can't imagine much more that would come from this, and then all sorts of interesting things come from that. So it ends up exploring this whole system.
All right, Steven, we're going to cut it off here so we can get some more calls in. Thanks for calling in, man.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Carlos.
Hello.
This is the Hotspot. How you doing? You've got Jonathan Blow and the rest of us who don't matter. I don't know.
Fine. I actually have a question for Jonathan Blow.
Good.
I saw some screenshots, and I think a piece by Sophia Tong a few months ago or weeks ago, I don't know. And it seemed like it looked like very Misty-esque. So I kind of wanted him to elaborate on that.
Well, definitely games like Myst, and that whole, Myst was a huge game when it came out, and it spawned this whole generation of first-person, click-to-move mystery games, all of which were terrible. Maybe there were one or two that were good, right? But they were like all trying to be Myst-clones. So gameplay-wise, the gameplay of The Witness is very different from what you see in that whole genre. It like uses that genre as like an anti-inspiration in a way. But mood-wise and setting-wise and all that, the game definitely looks at games like Myst and things like that and says, let's do that. Let's create a location that has a lot of interesting places in it that you can go and explore that have personality. There's this overarching feeling of mystery and sort of a graphical style that's not exactly trying to be realistic, that's a little bit idealized, So I think that's maybe what you're picking up on in the screenshot. So yes, it's inspired by that, but also at the same time very different.
Right. All right, man. Thanks for calling in, Carlos.
Thank you.
Trevin.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for calling in. Sorry it took so long to get you. You were persistent, and it paid off. You've got Jonathan Blow and the rest of the hotspot. The stage is yours.
Okay. This question is for Jonathan.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what sort of problems do you encounter during your game development?
List them all.
All of the problems.
Problem number one is that game development is a tremendous amount of work. Right?
Yeah.
I know friends, at least one significantly, who would be a talented game designer, but he has chosen. So first of all, when he was making games, he wanted to do everything himself. So like all the music, all the graphics, and all that. And then he sort of has decided he doesn't want to do games because it's too much work. And like it's for the amount of time you would spend, you could write like a bunch of books, right? Or a bunch of songs. Or
What's he doing now?
Writing a book. He's finishing it up. So that's the number one thing, is that it takes a long time and you have to sit down. Some days you're less motivated, some days you're more motivated, but in general, you have to be willing to just be in front of the computer and do a lot of work consistently. And human nature is often not like that.
Yeah.
Like we often don't want to do that. So it's kind of like there's certain personalities for, like when NASA hires astronauts, they look for people who like aren't going to crack and go crazy when they go into space in a capsule for a month by themselves. Like especially independent development is kind of like that. Like you have to be able to be in these conditions for a long time.
So, all right, Trevin, I hope that answers it for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Ran, what's going on?
Hello.
How's it going? We got Jonathan Blow and the rest of the hotspot crew.
Yeah, I'm very excited. For once, I'm not dead tired at this moment.
Hooray!
I'm actually wired as a chipmunk on crack.
That sounds lethal. What do you got for us?
I actually have one question about a design specifically for Jonathan, and one for the general crew. Maybe you can help.
Well, give us the first one. We'll go from there.
When you were going through all the ideas for the next game after Braid, I understood you went through a lot of different ideas, different prototypes. How did you choose the final one that ended up being The Witness?
Yeah, so I actually had the idea for The Witness before Braid was done, and I was really excited about it. But I decided not to do it because it was obviously a very ambitious game design, and I was still in the mindset that like I have to type all the code, and I'm not going to have that much money to make the game with. But it turns out Braid was actually pretty successful financially, and so I could hire people to help. And at some point, I prototyped these other games, and I saw that I liked them, but then I also realized, you know what, I like The Witness more. Like, that's the game I really, really want to make more than any other idea that I have. So I just decided to bite the bullet and take this huge risk and make this hugely ambitious game, which seems to have been the right decision.
Right.
And I may go back, like I actually spent several months programming other games, and I have little running versions of them laying around, and I may go back to those later and pick them up and make them into something, or maybe not. It's hard to say.
What's your second question, Ran?
Well, I've been programming for about a third of my life, and I've been gaming for about 2/3. Basically, I know that what I want to do with my life from this point on, as soon as I finish with my current job, is games programming. But I need to learn, basically, about the field, about game design.
So your question is, where do you learn about it?
Where do I learn? Where do if there are online things or
Resources?
panels from IGF or something like that.
Is there anywhere that online that you think it does a particularly good job? Probably a lot of individual developers' blogs, right?
Yeah. So, like we were saying before, I'm very critical of some things. I think almost everything that's been written about game design is crap. It's really actually, in many cases, more harmful than otherwise because it'll indoctrinate you into old ideas of games that are not that interesting. There are a few that I kind of like. So Raf Koster has a book. I forget what it's called exactly. Theory of Fun for Game Design or something like that. That's a good book. Other than that, yeah, like individual developer blogs. But the problem with those is that developers are very busy, so they tend to start up a blog and it'll go for like 6 months, and then they just stop updating, right? So I can't even give you one right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Buy books. Import them from the U.S. All right, we got to move on, Rand. Thanks.
Okay, goodbye.
Hello, you've reached the hotspot.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going? You got Jonathan Blow and the rest of the hotspot crew. Who are we talking to?
This is Don.
Hey, Don.
So when I was playing Braid, I had always thought the last world was the most interesting because it was the one that introduced like the most wildly different mechanic with the ring. So I was kind of wondering what the inspiration for that was.
It started out just as a black hole kind of idea, right? Like, this is a game about time. So what happens if I just make time go at a different rate as you approach a certain point in space, right? And that was just where it came from. And then I just experimented with, well, what is that space? Is it on the level or is it something that you move around? And it made sense to make it something that you move around. And from there, that was all that was needed. Like everything else is just a detail, like how much it slows things down or whatever.
Right.
From there, the puzzle design was just about seeing what happens when time goes at different rates at different places in the level and then making things that illustrate that.
All right, Don, thanks for calling
Thanks
in.
very much.
Hello, you've reached the hotspot.
Awesome.
Hey.
What's up?
You got Jonathan Blow here and the rest of the hotspot crew. Who are we talking to?
This is James.
Hey, James.
What's up? I want to apologize to Mr. Jonathan because I've never played Braid, but I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan, and I wanted to know what you guys think of some of the changes that they're making.
To what?
So, I'm a big Elder Scrolls fan, and I was wondering if you guys would tell me what you thought of the changes they're making in Skyrim. A lot of people think that it's becoming a lot like Fable with all the jobs and whatnot.
Who wants to start?
I like the changes they made to the graphics. It doesn't look quite like balls anymore.
Okay.
So that's nice.
So they actually have female characters.
They have female characters? Wow, can you imagine? I hear they have more than one voice actor, too.
Which is
shocking.
Wow. Well, I mean, for me, like, I don't even really know. Like, I go out of my way to not read preview coverage on games that I'm most interested in.
Sorry, Shaun McInnis.
Yeah, sorry. So, like, especially because I'll probably be the one reviewing Skyrim, and so very purposefully I remove myself from developing any kind of assumption about what the game is going to be or what the changes are. I want to experience them on my own. So I'm really not. So my answer is I have no answer, and I shouldn't have taken up this time.
Fair enough.
The job system is not such a huge concern to me because generally I'm the type of Elder Scrolls player where I just intentionally go away from the towns, get away from people with jobs, and just get lost in the woods for like 2 hours.
That's a real life.
That's how I
Chasing bears with knives.
I'm like an adventurous hobo in the Elder Scrolls games.
Coincidentally enough, watching Shaun play these games is the most entertaining. It's almost more entertaining than playing the games.
Yeah. So as long as I'm still able to do that, and there's that sense of surprise and delight in discovering all these crazy little hidden gems in the world, I'll be happy. And yeah, I'm not too worried.
Do you plan on playing this game, Jonathan? Or does it interest you at all?
Yeah, it interests me. I mean, the last 2 Elder Scrolls games didn't so much. I was more of a Gothic series guy than like a
the series is
Morrowind
so
guy.
good. Until
I know.
3.
Well, until they messed it up, right? So I'm hoping.
Blasphemy.
Huh?
Say that again?
Blasphemy.
Oh,
Blasphemy. No, Gothic 1 and 2 are really good.
Gothic 2 is one of the finest RPGs
I would
ever.
say it's blasphemy that you haven't played Braid yet.
Oh, no.
I would say you guys don't know what blasphemy means.
But yeah, I mean, I look forward to Skyrim. I'll play it.
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing I didn't like about Oblivion was all the auto-leveling monsters everywhere, because that took away the illusion that it was a real place, right? It's like you walk somewhere and suddenly everywhere is equivalent to everywhere else.
Yep.
So
yeah, that cave that had spiders should always have spiders, and that one should always have goblins. Like that's where goblins live.
Yeah.
Go back to your home.
Cave.
The goblin cave.
As for me personally, I don't know. Oblivion was.
Thanks, Magrino.
I'm
Next
sorry.
caller.
Oblivion was like the first game that really that I really liked as far as action, like first-person action RPGs, and I have a very open mind towards whatever comes out of Skyrim. I'll probably like it. I don't know. Thanks for calling in, man.
Thanks a lot.
We helped.
We helped, maybe. I don't know. We're gonna move on. I feel like that's the running problem with live calls. It's just like I don't know what to say.
I'm gonna throw in information here. That book you're talking about by Ralph Costner is A Theory of Fun for Game Design.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, I don't know if you said that or not.
I think I did.
Yeah, I think you. I think
Very
you
close.
Well, I should clarify too that PSP does have minis. This has been bothering me for like the last 30 minutes that I said something about like not, handhelds don't have a place for little teeny games to download, and that's actually not quite
There's
true.
a 3DS
This has been
store
bothering me.
also, but they're not promoted and they're not easily accessible and blah blah blah. There's a problem.
Does anybody else have any more confessions?
Okay. Sean did some nasty things with a hobo.
Oh no! I was actually.
It's more of an
party to that.
apology than a confession.
Well, this
So
is
we're
the
gonna
city for it.
We're going to move on to 10 years ago, This Week in Reviews. This is a segment that we do where essentially read off a game review and try to guess what it is. 10 years. This game got a 7.0. This game has its share of ruts and potholes, but it will take you to memorable places. The story won't win a Pulitzer Prize, especially with its melodramatic ending, but for a game, it's entertaining thanks to its exotic setting and the emotional quote-unquote hook of trying to rescue a lover. The puzzle usually provides plausible challenges without becoming frustrating, though some may seem a bit too simple. While the game isn't very long, somewhere around 10 hours, and doesn't offer much replay value thanks to its essentially linear progression, it's a fine example of old-school adventure gaming with a modern presentation. You guys probably have no idea. It's pretty obscure.
My favorite part about these reviews, it's always something like, the game isn't very long, it's only about 70 hours.
So it's an adventure game. Can I ask? It's an adventure game, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
From Microids?
Microids.
Microids?
No, Siberia got a much higher score. Siberia.
It does have a country in the name. A country in the name.
Russia.
Road to India.
Oh, I remember that game.
Yeah.
Why are you picking the most obscene? No one's gonna.
I don't know.
It was 10 years ago.
I picked that one because it kind of had some puzzle and some story, and in honor of our guest. I don't know. It seemed like a good
Yes, 'cause
idea
other games
when I
don't
was
have puzzles or
spending
stories.
about 5 seconds pulling these together.
Yeah, I never heard of that game. We don't, game designers don't play as many games as game press people do. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got one more for you. 7.1, and this is actually more.
So it's 0.1 better than the last game.
0.1. Yeah. Totally. The 1997 release of Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation created an interesting rift in the RPG genre. On one side, you have lavishly produced pseudo-cinematic epics like the latter-day Final Fantasy games and Sony's derivative Legends of Dragoon. On the other side, you'll find all the little RPGs that could, games like this one. RPGs from this first category cater to more than one audience, satisfying genre fans and casual gamers alike. Remove the graphics, though, and you lose the attention of the mainstream, which is precisely the situation that this series is in. Those looking for an FMV extravaganza need not apply, but if you value the gameplay that really makes an RPG what it is, you'll find a lot to like in this game.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
It's like Fire Emblem or...
It's like a review generator 4.0.
I like that we settled on what makes an RPG in this review.
Yeah,
we just came right out and said...
That was the introductory paragraph.
Yeah, considering that we've still had this argument about certain Mass Effect games.
From Namco.
Tales of, I don't know, Symphonia. I don't know.
Tales of the Abyss?
Tales.
There's a lot of Tales.
Destiny 2.
Tales of 2001.
I feel like this segment only works when there's just like a huge game coming out.
Yeah, there's a
otherwise
chance.
I'm just like, maybe I should be a bit more selective.
Well, at least in the coming weeks, there'll be the fall releases and the GameCube and the Xbox come out. Hey, the Xbox is coming out.
Right. So that was 10 years ago this week in reviews. I should say that before I started taking live calls, I should tell you guys how to contact us if you're interested in live calling the hotspot. You can do so in two ways. One, we have a Skype account, which is, GameSpot, HotSpot. It's one word. You can just add it to your contact list. Or you can call us with your boring old phone. The phone number is 415-644-5065. Moving on to corrections, clarifications, retractions, acknowledgments, or apologies. If you have any of the aforementioned, you can drop us a line at hotspot@gamespot.com or give us a call at 1-877-506-8324. Once again, that's 1-877-JOHNTECH. And actually, last week we called. We put out the call for a revision to the John Tech,
a less misleading mnemonic device to remember the phone number.
Shaun McInnis did that. Keep listening after the podcast. We have a good retort.
Okay.
But so we have a question. Eric asks, I was playing FIFA the other day, and as the computer scored against me, I found myself mashing the skip button during the celebration, as I always do. For some reason, I was forced to watch the other team perform flips and annoy me, and further annoy me by prolonging my failure. So my question to the panel is this. What is the best favorite example of yours in which a video game experience grinds your face into the fact that you lost or failed at something?
Cutscenes after a checkpoint, I would say.
After?
Any game where the checkpoint occurs before the cutscene in which the boss introduces himself with a 4-minute monologue about why you're going down. That's I can't name any specific examples off the top of my head.
Gears 2 actually did that.
Oh, did
which
they?
you would think that they wouldn't, but yeah.
Gears 2 made a lot of mistakes.
Ninja Gaiden, when it calls me Ninja Dog and says that I suck, and why don't I turn down the difficulty? That's always a
Dance Central boos you if you're not doing well, which seems like counterproductive.
Well,
what are they doing?
Rock Band as well.
Well, you can fail out. It's just like people are so self-conscious when dancing and dancing in front of people, and when you get booed, I don't know what they're thinking. Like that was a really bad mistake they made.
Is this one of the things where you would put in like the whole like in shooters where like the closer you get to death, the more the game wants you to hate it by covering your screen so you can't see what's going on?
It's an abysmal game design that somehow caught on. I do not understand why developers do this.
But I don't know if that's really what he's talking about.
I like the condescending alternate descriptions for easy difficulty in some games. Like in Deus Ex, easy difficulty is called Tell Me a Story. In Wanted, Weapons of Fate, easy difficulty is called
Yeah, that was
very
Pete
true.
Wanat, who dropped the record number of F-bombs when he was on our podcast.
Wow. Jonathan, do you know, or do you have a why are they rubbing my face in it story? Or do you know why developers do this?
No, I'm on the opposite philosophical side of this, right? I don't like the idea of games as like ego stroking tools, right? Mm-hmm. I think if you're supposed to do something and you fail, then you failed. And that's just how it is, and that's reality, and you should accept that.
What was that, Scarface? Like, you fucked up or something. Wasn't that what it was in Scarface?
Just shut up. We're not talking about Scarface.
I don't know. But the point is, like, if there's a game and it's going to play a big victory animation for you, if you win, and that doesn't happen for the other team if they win, then that's weird.
It's like condescending.
It becomes some kind of like, why do you think that I need this kind of strange ego support from a video game, right? It's just, it starts to get really creepy really fast. So,
can I ask a follow-up question then about that? Because I know I'm kind of curious about that. Like, where do you think the lines are drawn? Because sometimes I get very irritated with the game when it feels like it's no longer punishing me within the context of the game, but it's actually punishing me in the real life that I am now living.
Too human.
Right. So
I didn't
so
play
I'm kind
that,
of
so I don't know.
Well, but I'm kind of curious. Do you think that there's a line between, okay, my punishment is coming as an in-game punishment versus you're now punishing me in my life? Like the two human thing, like when you die, you have to wait, like go through this 45-second animation where an angel comes down and lifts you up into the heavens every time you die. And
well,
so
to
me, that crosses a line, and now you're inconveniencing my real time. You are wasting my time as opposed to punishing me for my loss.
Yeah, I mean, that also, I think that's really bad design when that happens. Not having played this game, I don't know anyone who made it, whatever. Sorry, Dennis. But
please don't come blow up my car.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I'm also not saying that I think people should be punished for getting things wrong in games, but I do feel like there is this creepy tendency toward one-sided, wow, you're the best, right? Like all these first-person shooters, you play Call of Duty, whatever, right? And it's not about what it means to have a gun trying to shoot some other guys, right? That's like what Counter-Strike is about. I'm a big Counter-Strike fan. I love that game. Call of Duty, especially single player, is about how it's cool to run around with a gun and shoot a bunch of guys, right? Which is a different thing. It's an ego-stroking thing, as opposed to being an actual like competitive skill-honing thing, which is what Counter-Strike is.
Totally agree.
I'm going to get so many death threats for saying
No, you are totally right.
We're on your side on
Every
this one.
element of the game design in Call of Duty is make you feel like a badass. I was going to say Space Marine, Earth Marine.
Yeah, exactly. And that,
none of it reflects reality. None of it is rewarding.
That is kind of creepy to me. Like, I don't like it, and I don't want to play
you.
games that are like that, right?
It's basically Dynasty Warriors in a war setting. That's all it is. Because there's no AI, and you're just gunning down idiots. It's not interesting game design at all, and it's ego-stroking bullshit.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on. Last week we touched on DICE and them wanting to put the whole flap over, we don't want you to be able to kill civilians in Battlefield 3. We got a few of our listeners who had opinion. Our general opinion was basically, if you want to move things forward, you need to give people moral choices that are, impactful. So Bahamut S. Dragons writes in, I have a conundrum for you relating to DICE's decision to not have morality elements in Battlefield 3. You constantly talk about quote-unquote games as art, but it sounds like you want to force the artist to go in a certain direction, like having a message and whatnot. Doesn't having the public forcing a message into a game essentially break the freedom the artist should have while creating their work, a freedom which also includes, quote-unquote, I don't want to say anything with this.
Wait, what? I'm going to answer this right now. There's games as art and there's games as consumer products, and DICE is making consumer product, and that was our problem, was we want them to make something that has artistic merit.
Right, but what he's saying is, why shouldn't they be allowed to just...
They're allowed to do it, and we are allowed to rip them for being cowards and just focusing on how shooting guns is fun. Because it is like the lowest form, the lowest common denominator, and that's what they're striving for. So congrats, DICE, you're going to make a fun game that has no soul.
Yeah, well,
so whatever.
Here's the thing about this kind of question. Like once in a while, I make art games, so people come up with this kind of argument, like, what's wrong with making a game that's just for fun and that isn't trying to do something else? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But what I feel is a little wrong is when every game is that, and like we don't go the other way at all, right? And that's probably how it is right now with war games. Like there is no war game that's like Apocalypse Now, right? Or whatever. Or pick any war movie that anyone cares about, right? There's no game that's the game equivalent of that. I don't even know what it would mean for the game to be the game equivalent of that.
We've never seen an attempt even.
Yeah, well, that's something for developers to explore and figure out, right? And so it's nice when they do that. I don't know if it should be Battlefield 3, but someone. Right?
Well, I mean, there might have been a chance of Fallujah, but Konami got cold feet, and we're we don't want anything like this. It's controversial.
I have actually heard. I have not played that, right?
Neither have I.
But I have heard that it was actually would have really been terrible if they'd it was basically like Army of Two or whatever.
So it's a bro.
Kind of. I mean, maybe not as bro-y, but it was definitely like power fantasy, blah, 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 and not like we're going to take war seriously.
Well, that's kind of what they've done with Brothers in Arms, too, right? Like, Brothers in Arms usually at least try to be somehow brotherly in Army. And now it's all Quentin Tarantino.
The new Brothers in Arms?
There's two new ones. There's the Furious 5, and then there's a real Brothers in Arms.
Oh, the Furious 5 is the one I was saying. I didn't even know there was another.
There's another one.
4.
Man, do not doubt my math. That was a fifth Fury.
Yeah, I mean, in regard to Brothers in Arms, I think they've said that they feel like the brand can support two different takes on war.
But apparently there's only one real take on war in this industry, and it's shooting guns is fun, and that's all there is to it.
So one other reader wrote in, and I want to read this one too. J.A. writes, after listening to your conversation, I found myself feeling strongly that the inclusion of realistic killing of children in reality-based military shooters is not where video games, quote-unquote, need to evolve, as I believe someone in the group mentioned. Unlike games such as BioShock that take place in fictionalized worlds, Modern Warfare and other shooters that aim to portray combat in as realistic a fashion as possible are reflections of how combat plays out in present day. Unfortunately, one of the worst outcomes of our current military conflict is the killing of innocent civilians, and in particular the death of children. Because the accidental death of children in war zones is a reality for far too many families, the idea of replicating these scenarios for entertainment or even as a, quote, morally challenging situation for temporary simulation seems morally perverse and highly insensitive. I can imagine a game developer creating a game where you take the role of a terrorist who has hijacked a plane and you decide whether or not to fly the plane into a building in a major U.S. city. The game would no doubt be realistic, morally challenging, and well within the publisher's right to make, based on their freedom of speech. However, it would also be in poor taste and would cheapen the experience of those who have suffered at the hands of terrorists. He concludes by saying, most people implicitly understand that shooting children is horrific. I don't need to experience it in graphic detail from a first-person perspective to achieve a deeper appreciation of that.
First of all, it's get off of the children for a second. We're just talking about all innocents and all civilians. And second of all, I don't remember what my second of all was, baby, but it's.
I think
I had something, but
I don't think it's in poor taste to give people a choice. I think that might be a point that this guy was missing here. Is that we don't want civilians in Battlefield 3 so that we can kill civilians. I would like civilians in that game so that there is that choice, there is that moral gray area where you have to question yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be a little bit more careful with where you're spraying bullets because, the enemies might be right here down the street, but over there on the sidewalk hiding behind a car might be a civilian, and so you have to it adds that extra layer of thoughtfulness and questioning what you're doing. And I think to me that's a more interesting experience.
Would it work better if you had these type of situations in the sci-fi or fantasy realm?
No, I think it's actually, and I've said this many times in the podcast, it's more insensitive to ignore reality and say war is just about fun killing. I think that's way more insensitive and way more offensive than actually presenting war in a realistic way. So I completely disagree with this guy's premise.
Well, here's my thing with this, which is that I think there's a fundamental premise that doesn't necessarily have to be true, which is that a game has to be fun. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there are lots of arguments, and of course, most games are fun. That's kind of why they exist for most of us. But I mean, a lot of us, like I look at Heavy Rain or something like that, and I don't think, I had lots of fun with that game. That's not the word that I would use to describe that game. Or like, look at some of the movies that you remember over the course of time. How many of them do you say, I felt rip-roaring, wonderful after that? I saw Dancer in the Dark, and I couldn't wait to dance a jig when I was done. I think it's okay for a game to not be fun. Mm-hmm. I don't. And so most games by nature are very fun. So why not a developer? I remember like looking back, and I don't want to say because we just bashed Call of Duty for a little while, but when I played Modern Warfare 2 and I played the No Russian level, right? I felt sick. Like I felt awful when I was done, and I had to step away from the game for quite a while after I'd played that. And so in a sense, I think that there's a certain success there, believe it or not. That game accomplished. And you finally put me in a situation where I have to think about this stuff, and I'm confronted with this stuff, and I felt awful. And in a way, I think it's great that I felt awful. Just like sometimes I feel awful when I watch a really horrendous movie that's put me through an emotional ringer. Like, I think it's okay for a game to do that. Like, I don't think all games should do that. I hope they don't all do that. But I think it's okay for a game developer to say, I'm going to make something that's not fun. Instead, I'm going to create this emotional experience for somebody instead, and see where that takes you.
I agree.
I don't think Battlefield 3 should be that game.
I think the weird thing about games, though, is like creating something that's not fun in a movie setting can make money. And I don't know if creating a not fun game can make money.
I don't know. I mean, like Braid isn't really a game I'd classify as fun. Like it's a different emotion I got from Braid, and that's a success. I mean, there's some different emotions. Minecraft isn't really fun. It's about exploring and discovery, and that's where it comes from. That's where the appeal comes from. I don't know. I mean, Meat Boy's fun. Like there's completely different types.
Vanquish
of
is
things.
pure fun to me.
Yeah,
like, that's to me the specialness of that game is different than what we talk all the time about. Most games are fun.
Yeah,
what makes a game a 9 versus a 7 is what makes it more than just fun.
Yeah, I think you can be commercially successful and not be fun. I guess. Sorry for not saying your game.
Yeah. P.S.
Your game is not fun.
Braid is not fun.
Yeah,
I only gave it a 9.5.
That's not like the adjective that comes to mind when I think of Braid.
All right. We're gonna unless you have a response to that, which you don't have to. We're gonna move on.
No, I kind of agree though. Like it wasn't made in order to be fun, right? Yeah. So.
Right.
Yeah, well, you succeeded there. Yeah. It just sounds so insulting, doesn't it? I don't mean
it does. It does. But but no, I mean not as a game designer, right? Because we always think about like how do we get past fun as a goal, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so that's gonna put a cap on that. If you have a correction, clarification, retraction, acknowledgement, or apology, we got to shorten that. I don't know.
Whatever. Just call it an ASAT or something.
HotSpot at GameSpot.com. Give us a call 1-877-JOHN-TECH. Trivia? You guys want to? We're keeping trivia, or we're keeping John Tech.
I was shaking my head at John Tech.
Yeah, trivia is good. Let's do trivia.
I actually had only one person write in with a suggestion, and it's pretty offensive.
Yeah, you emailed that to me. It's best that we don't repeat that.
Right.
Tell us afterwards, please.
All right. Trivia segment renamed. Nighthawk Fury has officially named this segment. Here's what he writes. Immediately in my head, I started going through the ideas, and I thought of the movie Speed. Not sure if you find it derivative, but then again, you did want to name it on the spot. Here you go. Pop quiz HotSpot.
God, I like that movie a lot.
Pretty good.
Oh yeah, but I'm taller.
All right, so trivia segment. I think you know obscure gaming trivia from NES era and beyond. Write in, stump our panel, and I will send you some fairly mediocre prizes that may or may not include a free T-shirt that we got at some convention or a GameSpot branded energy drink. You don't know. Submit those to hotspot@gamespot.com.
Don't drink that if you get it.
Oh, do not drink.
Do not drink that.
It's mostly jet fuel.
Right. Arthur Dane writes in with our first trivia question. Since the panel tends to often praise the Sega Dreamcast, I figured they should know all the titles on the Dreamcast that sold relatively well. So out of the 7 titles that sold over 1 million copies over the length of the system, can you name 3?
Okay.
My first 2 thoughts are Soul Calibur Sonic Adventure.
Yeah,
You're doing pretty well.
And Crazy Taxi?
Crazy Taxi. That's actually the first 3 that he listed.
Wow.
Can you name any more?
Is there an NFL 2K in there?
Yes, there is.
Is there a Phantasy Star Online?
No.
Is NBA 2K in there?
No.
Good.
No? Oh, really?
There's a big one. That's
Shenmue?
Shenmue.
Oh, God.
One more. It's a big franchise. Resident Evil.
Resident Evil Code Veronica.
Right.
Veronica.
All right.
Well, I got the first.
Finally, you guys answered a trivia question right.
All right.
We had quite a drought going.
I like the Dreamcast. I don't know if I've mentioned this 1,000 times before.
So Tony P writes in with our second, and apparently we may have insinuated last week that he liked him some furries. I don't know why we did that, but our apologies, Tony P.
Well, maybe he really does like furries, and that's why we did it.
Maybe, I don't know. So his question is: it's only fitting that since you guys bashed Sonic, that I ask you a question about him. The creator of Sonic, Yuji Naka, originally had Sonic as a rabbit with long extending ears, which eventually changed into the fast-rolling hedgehog. What character in Sega Genesis game blossomed out of the original character design for Sonic?
Knuckles?
No. It's
No.
not related to Sonic.
No. Oh, wait, hold on. Repeat the question.
So it's a game that stars a stupid bunny
rabbit.
as opposed to a stupid hedgehog?
Yeah, long extending ears. Was the original design for Sonic.
But
all I can think of was Jazz Jackrabbit that was a rabbit.
Nope.
I was thinking of Bucky. I don't even know if that's a thing.
No.
Bucky?
Shut up.
All right. Last chance.
Bucky the bunny.
I'm a Dreamcast guy, not a Genesis guy.
Rystar?
I know. I was actually thinking Rystar,
Why
but
didn't you say it? Now I gotta send this guy some junk.
Because it's nothing like the bunny that he's talking about. How am I supposed to know? It's a stupid star.
All right.
That's a misleading question. I could have said like Toe Jam and Earl. I mean, it was just a random game I had to guess.
So the stretchy limbs enable him to pull and yank himself around the level.
Yeah, Yuji Naka's not a good game developer. I said on the podcast, quote me. He doesn't make good games.
I just
and
don't
then
think
he makes Sonic.
I just don't think it's appropriate for a game character to yank himself about the level. That doesn't seem right.
Oh my god.
It is from the Japanese.
Can we
What do you
ban
expect?
any further Sonic questions, please?
All right, so Tony P,
you're offended by.
I don't
as opposed to my joke.
I'll
Your
find
joke
out
wasn't
where you,
offensive. Sonic is offensive.
I'll find out where you live, Tony P, and send you some junk.